the thing is, if you're going to have freedom of speech, you've got to use it. Yeah. The only way you can maintain freedom of speech is to push and keep using that freedom of speech. Otherwise, it all becomes a bit of a mush, and we become like victims of psychological warfare. I mean, the big media corporations, I think, are pretty much in the grip of the military-industrial complex. Through all sorts of reasons, journalists who have got a big audience, not me, but journalists who have got a big audience, are sort of gently weeded out. Look at what's happened to Newsnight, for example, over the last year or so. We started with Michael Crick, very good political journalist. He was bullied out because he was doing all these interviews with politicians, and then he'd come back and find somebody at Newsnight office has deleted my interview. And he's then told, oh, we haven't got enough space on the hard drive. And he's saying, no, keep my interviews. I might want to use them in 6 months' time or whatever. Oh, no, there's not enough space on the hard drive. So eventually, after begging that his interviews he's doing with politicians can be kept for him to use in the future, he gave up and he went to Channel 4 News. Who else has left? Newsnight. Jeremy Paxman's finally given up, hasn't he? I mean, you know, come out as a Tory and everything, but which you kind of knew anyway. But you know, at least he was dogged in his questioning. The other person, most important maybe, that's left is Paul Mason has been bullied out of Newsnight. Now, this is the programme that refused to broadcast the interviews with Jimmy Savile, isn't it? Do you remember a couple of years ago, Liz McKean, who's their social affairs correspondent, interviewed some people women who'd been abused by Savile. Now, it's very difficult to get someone to go on camera to talk about an experience which was so horrific all those years ago. They want to forget about it. But she'd managed to do it. Liz had done it. And by the way, I worked with Liz back in the 1990s in Greater London Radio. Fantastic woman. But she'd got these interviews in the bag. And Peter Rippon, who was the Newsnight editor, said, no, you're not going to broadcast those. We're not going to broadcast those because we've got the Jimmy Savile special coming up at Christmas, and it's all a bit embarrassing, so no. Now, what he's doing is he's actually putting his arm round Jimmy Savile by saying that, isn't he? He's saying, sod these people who've been abused by him, who've just put their lives on the, well, not quite their lives, but almost everything on the line to go on camera, on national television to talk about being abused. And those interviews are now going to go in the dustbin. So what an appalling way to behave at the BBC. And you know what happened to Peter Rippon? He's taken off Newsnight, but he's given a job in charge of the BBC archives. At the same pay. The same pay. No punishment at all. So one wonders what he's actually doing. What is he going through the archives to rip out of the archives and destroy? And I'll just finish by saying the other thing is the Cook Report. Hands up who ever saw the Cook Report in the 90s. Yeah, because it finished in 2000. That was one of the most wonderful programs ever. Really a wonderful TV show. And Roger Cook, bless him, he's still around. You know, he's got a bit of a bad hip and everything. But an amazing guy. And he was pulling in audiences of 10 million people. What TV channel would turn its nose up at that? Well, the fact of the matter was he was bullied off by loads of lies printed in the News of the World, right? Over 4 weeks, loads of lies. And Central Television said, oh, I think we better pull the programme for a little while. And then he never got the programme back. But all the archives of the Cook Report were given to by David Cameron, because he was working for Carlton TV at the time in the 2000s or whatever, about 2001 or something. Cameron oversaw the archives of the Cook Report and put them in a place called Iron Mountain, right, to look after them. And then, funnily enough, almost immediately, there was a big fire in Iron Mountain. And all of the recordings of the Cook Report for all those years were all burnt to a cinder. So if anyone here has got an old recording of the Cook Report on an old VHS tape, see me afterwards. Anyway, thanks very much for listening.